welcome to Dadhammer, One for the Road, our short form show where we provide a more focused discussion around specific Warhammer topics. The topic for this show is going to be model painting tips. So this topic really is for anyone that's thinking about starting to paint. Maybe you just got your Leviathan box, maybe you just started with a handful of models and you're thinking about painting, but it's a little daunting and overwhelming. We're going to talk about some tips and some helpful things for you, but also for those that have been painting for quite some time. Maybe you're starting a second army, or if you're like us, you've painted an army and you've come back a year later and you'd like to give it some brush ups and some improvements. So this is for you. We'll be talking about some things around upping your game for your model painting. I am David the Warboss, and I'm joined, as always, by the most generic Space Marine in the Imperium, Mr. Medicae Steve. Steve, how are we doing?
Super. Very focused tonight.
You dialed in.
Good.
Dialed in.
My friend.
Yeah.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. You doing okay?
I'm doing great, man. I'm also
Awesome.
very focused. The short form show, it always tests my ability to keep my mouth shut, which is a constant struggle.
Laser focused.
That's right. But very exciting. We got a lot of good stuff, and one of those things where we've been doing it for quite some time, and so this is like sharing the good news, and I'm really excited about talking through some things that we've learned.
Yeah, a lot of fun.
Yep. Well, thank you so much for listening to our show. Of course, as always, if you like what you're hearing, make sure to rate, follow, subscribe our show on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen. You could also find us on our website, dadhammerpodcast.com, and of course on social media, where we post our pictures of our latest projects and chime in and give words of wisdom, or just words, not always wisdom, but just words on the social media sites. But let's get right into it here and start off with we've got 5 tips for you. So 5 tips around model painting. And the very first one is probably the most important, and something that I have to tell myself and reiterate every single time I start painting a new model, a new army, or I'm thinking about it, and that is to set my expectations appropriately. We have talked about this on our Bolters and Booze podcast. We've talked about it on other shows, and setting your expectations at a reasonable level is so important. And as a reminder, painting is a skill that is learned. Some people are, they have that instinct and they're going to be great at it right out of the gate. But it really is something that you learn. You got all these techniques and some things that are going to evolve over time. And I like to compare it with just having a guitar. You bought a guitar and you're doing your 101 learning chords, and then comparing yourself to Jimi Hendrix in a week and saying, well, wait a minute, why am I not as good as him? It's a very similar, maybe a stretch, but still a very similar analogy where you need to set your expectations. And I think doing so, you will make sure that you're satisfied. You paint something, you go through all the steps, you have your finished product, and take pride in it, and know that you will evolve and get better over time. And Steve, I know that when you first started painting, you were telling me that there's all kinds of resources out there and guides and how-tos and things, and even the YouTube, of course, is a great place, but also the Games Workshop official tutorials are really good.
I think some of the best starts I got were from those, and I think if you go back to some of the older ones with Duncan and Peachy and some of the newer ones are great, very much on the same vein. But those guys were such good presenters, but not only good presenters, they were good teachers. They made you feel like you could do what they're doing. Now, those dudes are really, really good. Yeah. But the material they put out there was basic. It was what would you call it? Battle ready. They would go through, different levels of finished.
Yeah.
Models.
Battle ready and parade ready.
Correct. And I think that everything was achievable, and it's a good marketing thing because they have a paint system, but you can follow that. And I think most people with some practice, you could quickly get a lot of the results that they were showing.
Yeah, and I would go into game stores and they would sometimes have different videos playing, and they'll have the
Mm-hmm.
paint guides, and I'll be passing by and while I'm browsing some models, and there's been several times where I'm looking at the back of the box and saying, oh man, there's no way that I can achieve that. And well, truth be told, it's accurate. I don't know if I could
Yeah,
ever achieve that. Again, setting your expectations appropriately, but
that's right.
watching one of those videos, they just made it so approachable, and
Mm-hmm.
it really is just a matter of step one, step two, step three, with some behavior, some skill learned along the way of how to, how to angle your brush, how much paint you put on your
Yeah,
brush, and all of that kind of stuff. That I know that you've got a ton of guys that you follow on YouTube that have provided some great tutorials as well.
you can get lost in the weeds with them though. Sometimes, I mean, they get really advanced techniques that you shouldn't even be focusing on when you're first starting out, like wet blending and I mean, you could get serious glazing, and there's all kinds of techniques that
Hmm.
you just don't really need, especially if you're just starting out, because I think you're just gonna you get frustrated really quick.
Yeah, and it's the advanced stuff, and there's a reason
Mm-hmm.
that's it's called advanced. I mean, if you're just starting out, of course, now if you've been doing it for a while and you got the basics down,
Oh
I
yeah,
think it's also you can still learn from the same folks. It's just you're coming at it from a different angle, and you've got your own skill and things that you've built up over time. Well, the second tip for painting models is, coming around to we've set our expectations appropriately. We have looked at, all the tutorials and things, and all right, now I'm ready to paint. But Steve, I'm now, if I'm a new player, a new painter, I'm completely overwhelmed. And what the heck do I need to buy? So what's our second tip?
go slow. Build your paint inventory slow. You don't need to go out and buy the full range of any manufacturer. You know what I mean? Because it's a big investment when you talk about paint, because that could be what, 350 to $6 or $7 a pot or
Hmm.
bottle or whatever you look at. um, you could technically paint a model with house paint. I don't recommend that. But whatever is available to you, but you really need a decent, consistent line, maybe something that's geared toward model painting, because the I don't know, the consistency of the paint, the properties of the paint, and the pigments, and all kinds of chemical nuances are just going to make your life easier. It's not necessarily going to make you a better painter, but it will just make your life a little bit less frustrating and easier to achieve those techniques and stuff you see on the videos, like we mentioned. I think Citadel, Vallejo, and Pro Acryl are my top three.
Hmm.
That being said, Pro Acryl, I think we mentioned it before. It's a little harder to get because you can get it online, but the other ones you can find it in stores without much issue. Usually, especially if you go to Games Workshop store, they have Citadel paints, and I like them. I have a bunch. They're usable. They're always perform consistently for me.
Yeah, and the other thing that I'll say too is that you talk about going really slow, and that's not just taking it slow with painting or whatever, but
Hmm.
when you're buying paints, I don't know about you, but if I go into a gaming store and I drop $150 on just paint, I don't,
Hmm.
even though yes, I need this to paint,
Hmm.
I never feel great about that. I want to come out of there with maybe a box of models, or even a single model and a couple of paints. That just makes
That's
me
right.
feel like I'm not spending money just on paint.
Yeah, I guess technically, if you want to get really nerdy about it, you only need what, five colors:
Yeah.
white, black, red, yellow, and blue.
Yeah, okay.
Because I guess no, I don't suggest that. I'm not telling you to go out and start mixing your own custom
That's a
colors and stuff.
lot of
Because
mixing.
yeah, you definitely throw that all in the garbage pretty quick.
Mhm. Mhm.
But you can get your basic tones. Get some skin colors, get some browns, get some grays, and you know you may not be painting anything in your entire hobby that's ever blue. So maybe you don't need a blue. Just kind of dictate what you collect in accordance to what you collect.
Yeah, and I've gone into I go on the Games Workshop web store, and I'll look at the model, and they
Mm-hmm.
have the list of paints that are used, the videos that the Games Workshop puts out for tutorials. They also list it's either on YouTube or Warhammer Plus or wherever you go to
Mm-hmm.
watch that content. They have the list of paints, but I remember when I first started looking at something that was red, for example, and I was starting orcs, and so I wanted to do evil sons, and I would
Mm-hmm.
look at something red, and then I would look at the list of paints, and they would list like 5 shades
Yes.
of red just for a one panel, and I just thought, what in the world? And I I remember looking at that and thinking, well, that's where contrast paint was always appeal to me because I can have a little bit
Yeah.
of all of those with one paint. However, I think it's going back to what you were saying, just starting with the basics. If you just bought, for me, it would be corn red. That's one of the
Right.
colors. I bought corn red and then maybe one highlight. So
Mm-hmm.
if you're just starting out and you look at your model and you see several colors on there that are more predominant than others, and I'll say the little bits and pieces on the model, but so a piece of armor, or if you're playing chaos, there's a lot of black and gold and things like that, then I would pick up one color that is going to be the under the base coat, and then one layer to serve as kind of your highlight.
That's right. Well, and you can always take that layer paint, the lighter version of your base paint, and you can make an intermediate color
Yeah.
with that. You can mix them together. Now that is where you can start mixing stuff. You're going to have black, and you're going to have brown, and you're going to have white. I mean, I think those are three colors that you just really can't get away from.
Hmm.
And you can add any one of those to just change the basic property of the color, because it doesn't have to be perfect or exact. I mean, nobody's putting a mass spectrometer on there and looking looking exactly what pigment colors you got on your model. But you can temper your shades and hues as you learn to paint, and it doesn't take that much effort if you don't want to invest a huge amount of money in paint.
Yeah, and I think too that it's important to remember that while you're painting, that you can always go back
Hmm.
and add a little more highlight. And I've done that multiple times. And contrary to what some people believe, even if you put some varnish over the model, I've got some spray varnish that I put
Yeah.
on top of some of the models. You can still paint over the top of that. I
Oh
promise.
gosh,
I've
yes.
done it before, and
Hmm.
I painted a model to the standard that I wanted it to be 2 years ago, for example, and then I painted two or three armies since then. And I go back and I've said this before on our podcast, and I go back and look at some of those early models, and I'm like, oh man, that's awful. And I put varnish all over those, and at the time I was really proud of what I had
Oh,
done. That was
absolutely.
the peak of my skill at the time, which was not a bad thing. And that's why setting your expectations when you're painting that is so important, because you set those expectations for the time. It's a point in time, and then you can come back later, and now your expectations are a little higher because you've learned some skill and you can apply that.
Yeah, I agree 100%. Actually, I mean, I did it today, but it was part of a technique. But needless to say, it works just fine. You
Hmm.
can give them a glow up all you want to.
Yeah.
Um, I think moving on a little bit, there's a lot of starter sets out there that you could get. You can just buy a set. They have anywhere from 8 to sometimes 12, depending on the manufacturer, and they'll give you a nice line of colors that you can use to get started with.
Yeah, and I think it's all about just building up your collection slowly, just like you would
Hmm.
with the models. You don't want to just go in and go on a shopping spree. I mean, unless that's your jam, that's just what you do. Then more power to you. But for me, that's kind of an overwhelming experience. And
Yeah.
starting out, I think it's just you can always go back. It's like going to Home Depot when you're going to build something. Just start out with the basic stuff, and then you can always go back. And well, if I've built many things and had to go to Home Depot like 50, 60 times. So
Oh man.
it's a little
Yeah.
frustrating, but you can go back.
I live by the motto, it's easier to add to it than take it away.
Yeah, 100%. Well, speaking of adding to it, our next tip here around model painting is to not spend a fortune on paintbrushes. And we've talked about different types of
Hmm.
paintbrushes before with, cheap and expensive brushes and all of that. And I, I'm usually more on the by the cheap brushes. I've done both, but
Hmm.
I personally buy the cheaper brushes, and I don't really, because I don't take care of my brushes. I don't do
Ah,
everything I'm supposed to do. And I
yeah.
remember watching a YouTube video. I think it was Miniac, I think, and he was talking about caring for your brushes. And he
Hmm.
started off the video with, having a little miniature bed with some covers, and he put his paintbrush in there. and, and that visual in my head, it's like, you could really take care of your brushes and
You
keep them in
could.
pristine shape. That's just not my thing, and so I
Hmm.
go cheap brushes. But to me, it's not really worth the expensive stuff, even though, and again, my expectations are set appropriately, I think. But Steve, I know your painting standards are higher than mine, and you've got some better brushes in your palette.
I have some good brushes. I have a decent set of Sable natural hair brushes.
Hmm.
Those I take really good care. I got the whole brush soap thing and all that stuff. But those came after I kind of got into it a little more.
Right.
Once I got the more techniques down. So those brushes I pretty much are exclusively using for edge highlighting, glazing, faces, small things that I want a good point and a good flowing brush for. You don't have to go there. You don't have to do that. You can get some very moderately and decent priced uh, synthetic brushes, and they're very very usable. I do wash them out, but you need some beater brushes too. I mean, you
Yeah.
don't have to take care of those. It's it's just pigment and water at the end of the
Yeah,
day.
yeah,
you
and
know.
and even with the brushes, if you're trying to do something really fine, for example, I was painting an eye on not on a face, but like on a chaos medallion. I
Hmm.
was painting a dark apostle, and he's got this. I want to say it's on his belt, like a chaosy looking eye, and you paint the black line down the middle, and normally you would think,
Hmm.
well, I need a very fine tip brush to get that exactly right. But there is a technique that and I've seen a lot of people do, is you can totally mess that up. That black line could be overly thick, and then all you got to do though is go back over with some of the yellow. In this case, I did yellow, and you paint on either side of it, and you do little bits at a time to thin that black line in the middle out. So again, I'm doing that with cheap brushes. So that
Hmm.
is a prime example of, yes, you can absolutely get more expensive brushes, and you probably won't have to do that second or third step that I'm talking about. But you can also still go cheap, and there are some hacks,
Yeah.
some tips and techniques that you can do to get that finer detail that you want.
And I urge our listeners, if you go check out on Instagram and stuff, David put a post up there with that model he was just talking about, and it's sharp. It looks really good, and you can see what he's talking about. I think I think that's more important. Is like we'll post stuff about our models and just some pictures and stuff, and I think for us it's a little more than glamour shots, because I mean, you and I are both we're not like pro painters or anything. We're proud of
No,
what we do,
no.
but what we're explaining in this are the techniques and the things that we use to get there. So
Yeah,
you can check those out for sure.
yeah, absolutely. Well, number 4 on our list of painting models is to trust the process. And
Hmm.
the process that we're referring to are these painting techniques that you learn over time. And Steve, I know that your process and your journey through painting and the evolution. And I mean, I was even looking at some of your models that you did fairly recently with the Eliminators with those camo cloaks. I mean, there's no way that you would have been able to do that 2 years ago, right? It's just
Oh no.
your skill has evolved to the point where now you can put this crazy blended looking thing with these camo cloaks, and it really looks great.
And I was petrified to do it. So I think some of it comes with confidence,
Hmm.
and you just got to just dig in and go after it sometimes. But I do like to go fishing and stuff, and there's an old saying out there that fishing lures catch more fishermen than they do fish. So there's a lot of things out there right now, especially in this market, that are really really set out to hook the hobbyist. Like,
Hmm.
oh, there's a speed paint, oh, there's a contrast paint, this is all you need, you're going to do this and it's going to be like talent in a bottle. um there's a yes and a no to that, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
uh I personally recommend everyone do the old standby, the base coat, the shade, and the highlight. And whether base coat with a rattle can, and that's your base coat, or hand paint it, whatever you do, I look at it as like a coloring book. Block it in, stay in the lines, all that stuff. Then your shade paints, which we didn't really mention, are just they're specifically formulated paints that really want to find the recesses and leave the raised surfaces, but really uh, dig in and sort of make the recesses dark.
Yeah, it gives you the
Um,
depth, right?
the depth,
Yeah, the shadows and things like that. That unless you're a very skilled painter, you don't build things up like that. I guess a very
right?
skilled painter would start with the darkest colors and build all the way to the top. When
Mm-hmm.
most of us start with just a base coat, and then we kind of want to work backwards and forwards. We put in the
Mm-hmm.
darker stuff afterwards, and then we highlight it after that.
And I think that's perfectly valid, and it'll teach you a whole lot about the process. Because when you base coat it out, it's like, oh, this looks like a coloring book. I mean, it doesn't look great.
Hmm.
It lacks a lot of substance. But man, now there is something to be said about shades being talent in a bottle. You could throw some shade paints over base coats and almost walk away and call it done in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
And then you can go to the highlight, and then whether that's an edge highlight or you do something a little bit quicker and a little I don't want to call it easier because it's not easy. It is a skill, but maybe you dry brush instead of do the fine edge highlighting. But whatever you want to do, just make those little edges pop and those kind of things. There are easy techniques that you can learn to do that.
Yeah.
And usually you can kind of sort of stop there for a minute and then see where you want to go. But when you first start, you're going to be like, I am never going to make this model look good. But if you stick with your little plan and you stick to that process, I promise you'll get there. And then, because to go back to what we were saying before about like contrast paints and speed paints, yes, they are faster. I'm going to go on record saying is like, I don't think those are necessarily a beginner technique. I think there's some little caveats and little tricks that you have to learn that are very different than that whole base shade highlight system.
Yeah, I agree with that. And the whole slap chop method, and
Mm-hmm.
there's nothing wrong with that, but I think that's not something that you do when you first start. You do slap
Mm-hmm.
chop methods, and if you're not sure what that is, just go look up on YouTube, slap chop painting Warhammer. Just go look up that, and you'll get all kinds of stuff. But that's a I would say it's an advanced technique disguised as a new person technique.
100%.
And I would also say too that the edge highlighting, because I did edge highlighting a little late. I started painting my Space Wolves army, and this is for the Space Wolves army is something I need to go back and paint again, because
Mm-hmm.
I've learned new techniques. I want to go back and repaint them. But the edge highlighting, I started about halfway through a squad of like 15
Mm.
intercessors, and then when I just tried it on one model and I really liked the way that it looked, And then I went back and looked at the rest of them like, oh man, now I got to go back and do that. So I would recommend, if you're just to try edge highlighting, it really
Hmm.
does make the model pop, but do it early to determine whether or not you actually want to spend all that time.
Yeah, and you'll get there. You'll see if you like it or not,
Yeah.
and you'll find your own way of doing it too. Some people are more of a don't really like the straight line, but maybe they'll stipple it a little bit, or
Hmm.
make it a little rough. It's your model, it's your thing. Just if it looks good, go with that.
Yeah.
Just
And
keep experimenting.
exactly. And, as a reminder, it is just paint. It's,
Mm-hmm.
it's, this is your hobby, and you, going back to the very first one, I'll just keep repeating myself there.
Yeah,
Set your expectation and remind yourself that you can always go back and do it again later, and don't be ashamed of it. Just start small, trust your process, continue to learn, continue to practice, and you will improve and add more advanced techniques, and then you can go back and do it over again in the future when you want to.
that's right.
Well, for our final tip, for painting models, we're gonna. This is a very important one. Not necessarily about painting, specifically, but it's about maybe just thinking about not getting overwhelmed. And this one is start small. So start small with looking at an entire army. So maybe you started with a new box set, you got a brand new box with tons of models in them, or you've gone back into the store to start another army, and it's very tempting to go and purchase tons and tons of models and bring all that
Mm-hmm.
stuff home and assemble. And now you've got this backlog, and it can be very daunting. So my recommendation from personal experience is just to start with a small squad. If you can get some infantry, or maybe a single character.
Mm-hmm.
Don't take on the big stuff right away, even though it's very tempting to do so, because you're going to want to spend a lot of time on those, because those where everyone looks. That's where the eye is drawn.
That's right. Yes,
So I
absolutely.
would I would start with a small squad, or maybe a single character, or a support unit, and also don't paint the same thing over and over again. We've got a buddy that had painted a bunch of ultramarines, and I remember
Mm-hmm.
him telling me that he never wants to see the color blue ever again. And I get it, because I got that way with orcs, and I had painted so
Yeah.
much green skin, and I'm like, I don't even like green anymore, and I'm ready to move
See,
on.
I know. I paint Dark Angels, so I get a black, bone, and green. So I get to switch it up from time to time.
Yeah, and I think that's important too. Is just to know that, if you start small, you start with a single squad and then mix it up. I was painting chaos with a lot of black, a lot of gold, but then they've got
Mm-hmm.
some skin, and depending, kind of gross, but that infected looking skin. And to start painting that, it mixes it up a little bit so that it's not so boring every single time.
I was thinking, don't be afraid of faces.
Mm,
That'll be something that I. Speaking of start small, it's not. It's not because it's a small unit, because it's a small thing. Uh, to this day, I don't paint eyes.
no, I don't
I
either.
I, I, I fill them full of shade, and I don't even mess with them. And life is a lot better. And you'll actually, I feel like you'll get a better face, because you'll start working on the raised areas, and you'll get better. You don't have to put it on your model. That's the beautiful part. It's like all of Space Marines have bare heads in there, in addition to the helmets.
Hmm.
So you can just grab some of the extra heads and paint those guys. Um, and just practice, and it'll give you brush control. It'll give you a lot of skill, and you can kind of keep moving forward.
Yeah, and I've painted a few faces. I've tried to do eyes a couple of times and spent just hours trying to get
Mm.
the lines just right, and eventually I just painted over the top of everything because,
That's
and I'm just
right.
going to put shade. That's a good use of shade paint to put in there, to kind of round things out. And the last part of this would be, I know
Mm,
airbrush machines, or I guess just airbrushes in general.
mhm,
That whole thing is very appealing to a lot of people, and I personally don't have one, but as a testament, you can do it without an airbrush. Now, there are
mhm.
some effects that I've seen that I just can't get. There's some really good blending techniques, and lighting is really achievable with an airbrush, but it's definitely not a must-have.
No, yeah, pump the brakes on the airbrush truck. For sure. Yeah, I have an airbrush. I had one before I got into this. It's a big learning curve.
Hmm.
Don't even torture yourself.
Yeah, I would wait. If you're starting out,
Hmm.
definitely don't worry about the airbrush right now. Start small, build up your paint inventory. Make sure your expectations are set. Get some cheap brushes, and then just continue learning. And I think all of this will help you on your journey for painting your models.
And just enjoy it and have fun.
Absolutely. Well, that will wrap our show for this episode of One for the Road. Hope you enjoyed. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you, Medicae Steve. I am the Warboss, and we will see you next time on Dadhammer.
Take care, everybody.